So I have been sewing for probably the last 2 months, trying to pick it up, learn it, and I decided not to film it to try and focus on, figuring out what the heck I'm doing because it's a technical skill and has a lot of steps. But I did want to show the progress I'm making on my first corset. Now this one is not a traditional corset. It is mostly just like a kind of show one fashion corset, but I'm hoping that it will be the basis for a piece for my cosplay that I am making. I'm excited. We'll see how far I get. Anyway, I'm hoping to test the pattern and cut it down later and learn the steps for an actual more fitted corset that I will also need. So wish me all the luck, and here is a little bit of the progress. So I cut the fabric at least a month ago, so I don't have any footage of that, but I have been pad stitching the interfacing to the actual panels. My understanding is that pad stitches help with the shape of the garment, so I put them on the hip to help form that curve shape, and for most of the panels I kept it just wider stitches going up to save me time, because this part up here, since it's on the side of the body, it doesn't need as much shaping as like the hip curve and the main bust part. So I put my time and effort into those areas. That way I'm not doing this for the next year and a half, because it's going to take so much more sewing later on. I wanted to show you kind of like where I'm at. I have 2 more panels that I'm going to add a little bit more bust ribbing to, but most of them are complete, so I'm excited. Okay, next step is just adding boning to this bias tape to go over the back edges before the rest gets encased. This is so not nice to sew at all, because I can't flex the needle to push it through more than 1 stitch at a time. It's just gonna take forever. And ever and ever. I have the outer lining completed for the corset. I say completed loosely. I'm still doing seam finishes, but I think it's gonna fit. And I was a little bit worried because I bought like 12 patterns, and this was the only one that didn't have a size 14, and I completely missed it when I was doing things. So I just measured how much they went up for each like size, and then concluded I can add 1/4 of an inch to my pattern and it should be good. So I did that, and I think it's gonna fit actually pretty perfectly. I'm super excited about that. I'm also gonna say I just got an email from work, so I've been crying and not sewing. So I was thinking I was going to be done today with the seam finishes and then be able to stitch the inner lining, and we'll see what happens because emotions and money and adulthood and the state of the world. So I'm going to leave you now. Bye. Stitch them. This is why you don't sew when you're emotionally distraught or do anything that requires, you know, thought. Because I waste so much time. I am almost done putting the boning in my corset, but unfortunately I've been very distracted right after my work contacted me. My boyfriend went to the ER for like pain in his chest and stomach. All of his lab work came back. He's healthy, fine. It's just we don't have an exact reason for all of this happening. He did get hurt at work a little bit before this, so we're kind of waiting and seeing what's gonna happen with that. Help pin them down. I think that's going to be better doing it before I do the final like layer on the edges. Kitty, we need to work on that. You've gotten so bad. She seriously meows all the time. So anyway, flossing, I think it's going to look better if I do that before I do the final little rough edges stuff. So that's the goal for today. Am I going to finish today? Probably not. This is me, 2.3 seconds later, where I say, what's a first time corset without, you know, fucking up. So I didn't quite leave enough room between the top of the boning and the top of the... I talk and she screams. And the top of the fabric to really do proper flossing for a corset, so I'm gonna skip that. And just learn for next time, because I'm doing another corset right after this. This one's just, see if I can do it kind of thing. Okay, on to the next step. Since this is garbage, I don't know what happened to the size and everything else, because this one is way bigger, and I messed up completely, like on the front side, the stitches on these little curves, because bias tape is beautiful and awful. So I made this little fabric pieces out of like a nice shiny fabric that is not picking up on camera at all. But I'm going to stitch these on and then cap them over this and just foul the edges so it looks seamless and nice and hopefully not stupid, because this is dumb. This is really dumb. Like, I want to redo this whole entire thing, but I can't. Irritation. Okay, I'm skipping straight to the end of this project because getting the lacing part completed was a long month-long process. I think it was a month. I learned some things and I'm going to share what I learned. So my original pattern called for eyelets in the back where the laces are. And not knowing the difference between an eyelet and a grommet, I bought eyelets at the beginning of this project. For future reference, don't buy eyelets for a corset. I didn't know the difference between an eyelet and a grommet, but I will show you right now. So this little thing is the eyelet. To make it a grommet, you just add this little backing to it. That way the fabric is nice and smushed between these two, and then you tap this down and it's secure with those. This helps it stay in so it doesn't like pop out because there's no back on it. And now I bought all my supplies before I started, just going to Hobby Lobby because that's what we have. And when the eyelets didn't work, I had to come up with a different plan. I wanted to try and do the project as soon as possible, with mail times being what they are, with the fact that packages get stolen here a lot, which sucks. I was trying to make a trip to the next big city over, because in that city they have a leather shop, and I checked online. They had these in the size I wanted. They didn't have all the colors I wanted, but I figured gold and silver would be fine because I wanted to stock up a little bit because I have another corset coming up. And that was a task. You would think going just one town over, even if it is like an hour and a half drive, would have been easier, but it just didn't work out. So the first time I tried to go, Labor Day weekend, my mom lives past the city that we needed to go to, but we would drive through it to get there. We were chopping down a tree for her to save some money because my boyfriend has access to the tools. Well, we went Friday night. It was closed. Even if we could have driven up there Saturday, it was closed at 2, so we had to get the tree down well before that. We had to work when it was open because my mom worked after that. And then on Sunday when we drove back, it was closed. So that was trying to go trip 1. Trip 2, we actually managed to make it there. Unexpectedly, my boyfriend's friend ended up in the hospital in that same city. So we went down there and I picked out a bunch of things. So because I'm rushing, I didn't get enough and I hate myself, but hey, it's done. Look, it's done. Look at how pretty it is. Here's what I ended up doing. Because I added all this extra fabric, there's 3 layers for the actual corset, 4 layers of bias tape, and then 2 more layers for these little caps that I put on to make it look nice. That's a shit ton of fabric. So these grommets are long post. For whatever reason, I put back the shorter silver post ones and didn't have enough to do the back. So most of these are eyelets, and I've already had to replace 2. Yay. So I put the long post grommets here and here originally just because I figured the top and the bottom would take more strain, and these on both sides I had to replace, and I'll get to that in a second. But to further iterate, I can't speak. You can tell the big difference on the back. So this is an eyelet. There's nothing like really to catch it. It barely has a little roll to it. Where this looks much more secure. It's gonna last a lot longer. Much better. By grommets. Ignore the pattern. And my final thoughts on this before I show you what it looks like on is I sized up this to fit my measurements. So the pattern only went up to size 12. I'm a 14 in patterns, so I sized it up by just measuring in between each pattern to see how much they scaled it up, and it was 1/4 of an inch on all sides. Kinda. But putting this on, I know this isn't like a typical corset. It's more, I call it a fashion corset because it kind of takes these straps from stays. It is not as heavily boned as a lot of corsets could be, and they used a lot of patterns, like pattern fabric in the examples, so it's kind of like supposed to be pretty and not necessarily an undergarment like a corset would be. So with that in mind, when I put it on, it closes all the way down in the back, which is fine. It's supportive, it feels nice, I don't see any fit issues. It still needs to be seasoned a little bit, so the boning at the bottom is a little bit iffy, but overall it fits very well. It just doesn't give any, it gives shape, it just doesn't like size you down like a corset typically would. In fact, I'm actually 3 inches, at least 2 to 3 inches bigger in the corset than I am outside the corset. So it definitely adds bulk, but it does make a nice shape. My thoughts on this pattern is I think I would just want to do one layer. It has an inner and an outer layer, and I just think that adds a little too much bulk considering it's kind of sized to fit all the way closed and not really shrink you. There's no room in the pattern to size your waist down by pulling a little bit tighter. We're not talking about tight lacing, we're just saying like it's supposed to slowly cinch you in. So if you're looking for a structural garment that shapes you a lot, this is probably not it unless you go down a size, and then with the way the bust is and the way the straps are, I don't know if that would be a good choice in this pattern. So you might have to just adjust the waist in order to get that corsety shape size down. And considering it closes all the way in the back, I know some women have a preference where they leave a space between the boning and the back where the laces go across, and some people like it closed. I think just wearing this for 3 or 4 hours yesterday that I would prefer to have mine more open because the small of my back did end up hurting. Coincidentally, right where those 2 eyelets popped out, so I don't know if that has anything to do with it, and I don't think it does. So that's my thoughts on this pattern. I still like it. I still think it's cute. I might make another one as a single layer and make some adjustments because it's a pretty simple pattern to follow. It did take time because of all these little fell stitches for this bias binding, and the fact that I did do pad stitching, which is totally optional. Now, here's a footage of me wearing the corset.